Hi, I'm Peter.
I'm Varun, and welcome to the Swipe Smart podcast.
Okay, before discussing credit cards specifically, it's necessary to define what credit is and why it exists as an economic system. Credit is often treated as a modern invention tied to banks, plastic cards, or consumer spending, but that view misses its core function.
Credit exists because income and expenses occur at different times. People generate value over extended periods, but they need access to goods and services continuously. Credit is a mechanism that allows purchasing power to be shifted across time. It reallocates when spending occurs, not whether value exists.
This distinction matters. Credit does not create wealth, it allows existing or expected future wealth to be accessed earlier. When credit is used, future income is being committed in advance. Any credit system depends on the assumption that future income will exist and be sufficient to repay past spending. This timing problem appears everywhere. Students invest years in education before earning wages. Workers are paid after labor is performed, and businesses often incur costs months before revenue arrives. At the same time, expenses such as housing, food, transportation, and healthcare are ongoing and relatively inflexible.
Without a mechanism to bridge these gaps, economic activity would be severely constrained. In a world without credit, individuals would be forced to delay consumption until income was physically received. Large investments would be difficult or impossible. Risk taking would decrease. Economic growth would slow, not because people were less productive, but because they could not coordinate timing efficiently.
Credit solves this coordination problem by allowing decisions to be based on long term productivity rather than short term liquidity. Historically, this function did not require money. In small scale societies, credit was managed through informal obligation. Individuals tracked who owed what through memory, trust, and reputation. If someone provided labor, tools, or food, repayment was expected later. Enforcement was social, and failing to repay damaged reputation and reduced future cooperation.
These systems worked only within social networks. As populations grew and trade expanded, personal trust became insufficient. Obligations needed to be standardized, transferable, and enforceable among strangers. At that point, money became necessary, not to invent credit, but to quantify and scale it. Money allowed debts to be measured consistently. Financial institutions allowed obligations to be recorded, pooled, and enforced. Credits shifted from a social arrangement to a contractual one.
Once credit became institutional, risk management became central. When lending occurs, repayment is uncertain. Some borrowers will repay on time, some will repay late, some will not repay at all. Any credit system must account for this variation. Interest is how that accounting happens.
Interest compensates lenders for three factors. First, time. A unit of currency can be used to invested or saved. A unit received in the future cannot be used in the present. Second, risk. Some borrowers will default, and those losses must be offset. Third, opportunity cost. Capital committed to lending cannot be used for other purposes. And even in a hypothetical system where all borrowers repaid perfectly, interest would still exist because time and opportunity cost still exist. For this reason, interest is not a moral judgment, it is a pricing mechanism.
However, how interest is structured matters. Different products manage risk in different ways. Long term loans, such as mortgages, are secured by collateral. If repayment fails, some value can be recovered. Student loans rely on income expectations and legal enforcement. Credit cards are different. A credit card is a revolving line of unsecured credit. There is no fixed borrowing amount, no fixed repayment schedule, and no collateral. Borrowers can repeatedly access credit up to a limit, repay some or all of it, and then borrow again. This structure replaces nearly all emphasis on prediction.
Because credit cards are unsecured, lenders must rely on statistical modeling rather than physical guarantees. Borrowers are evaluated based on observed behavior patterns rather than individual intent. The goal is to estimate the probability of repayment and expected profitability of extending credit.
Credit scores serve this purpose. A credit score is a risk estimate derived from historical data. It compares the borrower's behavior to millions of prior cases. If people with similar characteristics and behaviors tended to repay reliably, the risk is considered lower. If they tended not to, the risk is considered higher.
This system is actuarial. It operates on probabilities, not judgments. Individual circumstances are less important than aggregate outcomes. Young borrowers are considered higher risk primarily because of uncertainty. Income is often unstable, employment history is limited, financial behavior has not been observed over long periods. From a lender's perspective, uncertainty must be reflected in pricing. This is why credit offered to young people typically comes from lower limits and higher interest rates. These features are not arbitrary, they're tools for managing exposure.
Despite this higher risk, young consumers are still offered credit. This is because long term customers are valuable. Early engagement allows lenders to collect behavioral data, establish usage patterns, and potentially maintain relationships for decades. Short term losses can be offset by long term profitability. Credit card systems are not designed around idealized behavior, they are designed around observed behavior.
Human decision making follows predictable patterns. People tend to discount future costs relative to present benefits. They tend to underestimate how long repayment will take. They tend to respond to minimum requirements rather than optimal strategies. Credit cards take advantage of those tendencies structurally. Spending and payment are separated in time. The immediate psychological cost of consumption is reduced. Minimum payments reduce short term pressure while extending repayment duration. Interest accumulates in the background. These features do not force people into debt, but they reduce friction around maintaining debt.
From a system perspective, behavioral variation is not a flaw, it is necessary. Pricing, profitability, and risk management depend on distributions of behavior rather than uniform outcomes. If all users behaved identically, the system would not function. If every cardholder paid their balance in full every month, issuers would still earn transaction fees. However, a substantial portion of total revenue comes from interest and fees generated by carried balances. The system is structured to remain profitable across a wide range of behaviors. This does not mean credit cards are
This is
inherently harmful. They provide liquidity, fraud protection, and flexibility. They allow households to smooth consumption and respond to unexpected expenses. They also shift financial obligation into the future.
Whether that trade off is beneficial depends on context. Short term liquidity for a predictable outcome can be efficient. Long term reliance on high interest debt can be costly. The same tool can produce different outcomes depending on how it's used. Understanding credit then is not about memorizing rules or following advice slogans. It is about understanding structure. Credit allocates time, interest, prices, uncertainty. Credit cards allocate unsecured risks along using behavioral prediction.
Credit exists because modern economies require it. The relevant question is how individuals operate within a system designed to manage uncertainty, price risk, and remain profitable under imperfect human behavior.
Okay, that's it for this episode. In the next episode, the focus will be moving from theory to mechanics. We will examine what happens technically when a credit card is used, including authorization, settlement, interchange fees, and the role of payment networks. Understanding these processes clarifies where costs originate and how incentives are distributed.
Okay, guys, thank you for tuning in and hope to see you next time.